So you were, William, a Navy SEAL for how many years?
Yes, sir. I was in the Navy for 26 years, and 23 of those 26 years I was in the SEAL teams.
Navy SEALs, underwater, holding your breath, pushing the physical to the limit, mind over matter. Comms can't count for very much.
Oh, comms is probably the most important thing that you can do. You know, yesterday when I gave my presentation, I showed you that SEAL delivery vehicle, and I didn't really talk about how we communicate in the back of the boat. So you have 2 guys in the front, underwater, 4 guys in the back. Well, how do we communicate back and forth? We're in the water. So we have to use nonverbal communications to communicate with one another. And what we found is nonverbal communications are oftentimes much better than verbal communications.
That's you're not talking body language there. You're talking deliberate signals to one another.
Yeah, deliberate signals. So I can give you so many different examples of nonverbal communications, whether I'm clearing a house with other teammates, or I'm underwater, or I'm in a gunfight, daytime, nighttime. We're much more effective when we communicate non-verbally versus verbally. And the reason for that is we simplify the communication. Most people, what I found is most leaders in any organization, they become very verbose, and they try to over-explain something rather than just getting straight to the point and telling people exactly what they want. Instead, they try to tell people how smart they are with all the words that they're using. So if you can, like, I tell people, if you can explain your message in 7 words or less, you're going to be very effective.
That's the narrative. Absolutely. That's about staying in contact and in communication. To what extent would a Navy SEAL study different ways of communicating, how to make a message resonate with people? You just touched on it. Shorten it, make it 7 words or less, and it has a higher likelihood of sticking. I mean, Navy SEALs, again, I think about working out. I think about pushing the physicalities to the limit. I think about fighting bad guys and bad women to some extent. Do you study human communication, how the brain remembers a message?
I study it now, but I don't think that we were really studying communication back then. We just studied what was effective on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And what we found, high stress, when you're talking about a high stress environment, life or death scenarios, underwater, no matter what it is, the more simple and clean you can make it, the less probability there is of any sort of miscommunication happening. Like if you give me a hand and arm signal, or you do something with your laser, or wave your gun a certain way, or squeeze me a certain number of times, I know exactly what that means. There's no question in my mind. I know what my next move is. But those are SOPs that we have to build in. So you have to figure out how you want to communicate, what you want your message to be, so that you can then break it down and make it extremely simple. So yes, you do have to study what is effective communication and what the effective words are, what the effective methods of communication are. They have to be very deliberate and very direct.
What percentage of candidates for Navy SEAL actually make it?
25 to 30% actually make it through training.
Right. Okay. And is it always the biggest, the strongest, the most physically fit?
It's almost never the biggest, strongest, and most physically fit. It's like guys like me that are just average, mediocre, just guys with a ton of grit that just don't want to quit ever.
You had 2 of your main messages in your presentation to the group we're seeing in Salt Lake City. First one was never quit. The second was accept failure. Those 2 don't seem to agree with each other. What do you mean about the difference between the 2?
Well, you know, never quitting, you're going to run into obstacles. You're going to have hard times. You're going to hit roadblocks, and you're going to achieve failure over and over and over. And that's okay, as long as you learn the lesson from that failure and you keep going. Most people, they'll try something and they'll fail and they'll quit. If you try something and you fail, and you try it again, and you fail and you try it again, and then you just keep going until you actually get to the end result that you're looking for, you're going to be successful. It doesn't matter what you're doing. We could just use examples like, what's the guy's name? Holy crap. I used to talk about him in my presentation. The guy who created the incandescent light bulb. Thomas Edison, thank you. He learned more than 10,000 ways to not create the incandescent light bulb. What if he stopped at like 9,000? 9,999. Oh, there's no way to create this light bulb. Then he never would have done it. He accepted failure and he never quit.
If 3 out of 4 candidates for Navy SEAL end up quitting because they've accepted failure, is there a form of communication that is used or could be used to help those candidates last longer? And I guess supplemental to that, tell me about communication in theater of war, because I know you've been to Iraq, Afghanistan. To what extent does communication play a role, not just amongst each other, but sometimes with those you're at war with, those individual people that you're in battle with?
So communication, there was a two-part question. There was one in about training or guys going through training to become a Navy SEAL, and if there was some sort of communication that could help them actually make it to the end of training. And I don't know that there is. It's really, actually there is. It's the communication that they're having with themselves. Whatever that story is they're telling themselves, that's the communication that needs to be fixed. So if they can fix themselves and fix the story they're telling themselves, fix the narrative, and communicate with themselves and like, okay, so what? We failed, we learned something, let's go and keep going. Oftentimes they're like, this is too hard, I don't want to do it, it's not worth it at the end result isn't really what I'm looking for. When they tell themselves, this is what I'm going to do, and no matter what, I'm going to make it to the end, then they're going to make it. The second part of your question was communication in combat and in those sort of scenarios. I will tell you, we've probably lost more people in training and in combat due to poor communication, a lack of communication, because we were relying on maybe old ways of doing stuff, or we got lazy in the way that we communicated, or the other party wasn't listening to what we were saying. I mean, we've dropped bombs on our own people, we've shot our own people, we've killed our own people, and I'm not talking just in the SEAL teams. I guarantee you it's happened to us in the SEAL teams in training, but it has happened, where we've, killed our partner force also, or they've shot at us. And because, things get chaotic, things get crazy and stressful, and our rational thought sometimes goes out the window, and we just get emotional, and we just like, oh my God, we're scared. Fear is a very powerful player out on the battlefield. And so when you're in those extremely stressful environments, communication is critical. Even if it's, oftentimes we've been very successful on the battlefield because we have the ability to sometimes listen to the communication that the enemy is having with one another. And I'll say that, sometimes we don't shoot the guy with the gun. Sometimes we shoot the guy with the cell phone or the guy with the radio, because he's out there, he's in his tracksuit on his cell phone, coordinating all the attacks that are going on. And me in a sniper position, once I see that and I recognize what's happening, I read the battlefield, and I know that that guy that's communicating with all the other forces, coordinating what's happening, I shoot him, I take him out of the picture. All the opposition force, they stop fighting because they don't know what to do, because they don't have eyes on the inside anymore. So communication, and that was something that we had to learn also. We go into combat and we write after action reports, and we pass them out to, our teams and the other forces in theater, so that we know the enemy's TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Well, you know what? The enemy's doing the same thing to us. We've had to change our TTPs time and time again because we go overseas. We use these techniques to go in houses or, fight the enemy. The enemy learns our techniques. They start, sharing them. We go in, we try to use the same thing. They counter us. So we have to change the way that we're doing business. So communication in everything that we do, it is the most important thing that we can do in combat or in training.
Okay, last question. You talked a bit about fear. And what I loved about your presentation was you have to accept fear. Fear is going to be a part of it. Giving into it, that's a whole other thing. Rather than tell me your theories on fear and overcoming fear, I want you to tell me a story. And I'm asking this of the Navy SEAL, a time that you experienced sincere fear, maybe the most you've ever experienced, and how you communicated with yourself to overcome that fear and to do what needed to be done.
Wow, I have to think about this really quickly. The first story that pops into my head, I told it yesterday, and it was about the guy that I didn't shoot, that maybe I should have, because right after that, I saw this Iraqi police officer. I was in Iraq. I saw that there was a gunfight going on our right side as we're going to go find someone else, and we come around the corner. We're driving very fast at night, blacked out, night vision goggles, the whole thing. And an Iraqi police officer, he sees us like as we come under the street lights, and he gets on the phone and starts calling some people. And I was like, something about that's not right. I feel like I should shoot that guy, but I didn't really have a good reason to yet. About 2 minutes later, an IED went off. Like, I was in the back of the Humvee, and it went off about 10 feet away from us. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And then people started shooting at us, and we're just hanging out like in the back of a pickup truck. And then about a minute later, and again, we're hauling the mail at night, and the next IED goes off. And the only reason that we live, I'm here to talk to you about it, is because we were driving so fast. That IED barely missed us. And so, and like I said yesterday, like the number one rule of being a Navy SEAL is you have to look cool. Like, it's a joke, but we have some ego. And we're like, we're indestructible or whatever. We die all the time, but and I'm like, oh, this is like, number one, something I didn't share yesterday is when I was 15, I was shot hunting. So I've already been shot one time. And so my thought process and what I share with everyone in combat, I'm like, I've been shot before. What are the odds of me getting shot again? They're pretty low, I think. So anytime I was in a gunfight, it was like, no big deal. Still a little scared, but I've never been blown up before. So now like I've got like 2 bombs have gone off. I'm like, oh my God, this is not good. And so, but all 4 of us that were in the back of that truck, we were like, we were scared, but we weren't saying anything. And it was actually the new guy, the guy with only his 2 deployments under his belt. This was the second deployment. Was like, hey, what do you guys think about maybe getting a little lower in the truck and like being less visible to the enemy, a smaller target? And we were all immediately like, yep, we're gonna get down and like hunker down and try not to die on this op tonight, because that was 2 very close calls. When we got back from that mission, the whole side of the Humvee was just like littered with bullet holes where the rounds had like bounced off. And I was like, how are we alive right now? This is crazy. So yeah, that was probably the most scared on a combat mission. Actually I have some other stories about being scared, but yeah, just, you just have to hunker down and move forward. And
the thing I pull from that is you listen to the new guy,
right,
with the good idea. So I pull from that in crisis communications, listen to the new ideas, follow process, follow procedure, follow your training. That's what that exists for, but be flexible enough to listen to the new stuff. The other thing I got from what you said, because you talked about the Iraqi police officer with the cell phone, sorry to add humor here, but I got shoot the messenger. That's
yeah, that's exactly right. I never thought about it like that, but yeah, 100%. Shoot the messenger, never be the messenger. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I really appreciate your time. I loved your presentation. I love that a Navy SEAL, who I'm obviously physically so far removed from that, and mentally probably quite far removed from that, but in your presentation, I got that maybe somewhere in my head there's a Navy SEAL within me, somebody that follows their training, faces up to their fears, and addresses things and gets things done. I hope that's the message that you want to get across.
That's 100% it. I mean, I want people to start thinking more like Navy SEALs, and the thing that we do that sets us apart from other people, we just think about things differently. We tried to not have this conventional mindset, and I think that's what you're doing with the mastermind. That's how you run your programs, how you run your business. You just do it differently than everyone else, and that's the thing that sets you apart. And I think that the more people that can start thinking about things differently, less conventional, more unconventional thinking, the better the world will be, and the more innovation that we will have.
That's a beautiful wrap. Thanks for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.